Welcome to the Wealth and Purpose podcast, where people who are led by their hearts come to learn the secrets to creating wealth in a way that feels really good and live their purpose fully in the process. I'm your host, Patty Lennon. I'm an ex-type A corporate banker turned intuitive business coach. I'm also a wife, a mom to 2 preteens, a professor, Girl Scout leader, and well, hey, you get it. Like you, I wear a lot of hats. Whether you're looking for inspiration to get started or strategies to get growing, I am here to help you create abundance in every area of your life and business. Welcome. Oh boy, I have a lot to share. How am I going to fit it all in this one little podcast? It may have to run over into a couple of different podcasts. Hey, it's Patty here, and I am back from the Wealth and Purpose Retreat. And oh my Lord, so many downloads are coming. So we were away this weekend with the Wealth and Purpose community in a beautiful conference resort center in Westchester, New York. And the theme of our event was mastering the inner game of sales. And so I had an agenda written out. And because I channel my events, I know that the event isn't always going to go as I had written on paper. I've come to trust the divine, because when I'm in the room, I am, allowing what is being called forth by the people in the room to come through me. And I've learned to be flexible with how that works, staying true to what I've promised, and yet also allowing the magic to take over, and it always does. And so that's always fun and exciting because I get to learn new things, just as people ask questions and the answer flows through me, I get to learn the answer with them because it's brand new usually to me. That gift of suddenly knowing something is called claircognizance. A lot of people have it, and because it's simply that you suddenly know something and it's in your brain, you don't attribute it to being a sixth sense gift, but it actually is. And the more you engage with a lighthearted feel around questions you may hold in your heart or questions other people ask you, and start to notice where information just shows up, you can play with the gift of claircognizance. And so there were periods throughout the retreat where people could sit around and ask me questions, either on stuff we had covered or just questions in their heart. And I love this part of events, this open Q&A without an agenda, because it's so interesting to see what's important to people. And before I get into some of the most interesting questions that had to do with fairies and muggles, what I want to just share is how it became so clear to me that, as I'm spending all these weeks talking about receiving as we lead up to the launch of Receiving School on November 18th, I've been exploring all these aspects of receiving. And what occurred to me is that, there's only so much receiving we can do inside a vacuum. That in order for us, and I'll just say me, to truly receive maybe some of the information I'm looking for instance, there's developments that are happening. I'm writing a book and I'm launching this new program, and content is coming to me, and I'm feeling it as I'm sitting in my home office. But then more so once I go out and I'm hosting this retreat and these questions are coming to me from other people, it's the energy of the environment, of that external environment, that's really allowing me to receive, what the world, what my people are calling forth from me. We don't, one of the questions that a few people asked is, exactly what is purpose? And purpose, we're living it every day. It's, our essence. It's who we are, and just living that fully. And all of us have come to serve others in some way, shape, or form. Even if you don't feel the need to have a business or bring those gifts to the office, let's say, you're affecting people by your energy. And so, really, in order for us to fully live out our purpose, in order for us to receive the next level of information on how our purpose is evolving, we really need to get and be around other people. And this digital world we live in encourages a very different experience. So I want to encourage you, you're listening to this podcast now, presumably alone or in some environment where you're experiencing the world digitally. And, when you're done listening to this, I'm going to encourage you to find a way to connect with a person. Maybe it's a client, maybe it's a potential client, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a friend you'd like to get closer to, some other human. Connect with them. Have a conversation, see what comes out. Because magic happens when multiple people are together. I was raised traditionally Catholic. I mean, that's my history. And this may translate, I'm sure it translates across many religions, but in our religion, there was a verse that said, when two or more are gathered in my name, there am I. And so whenever two or more of us come together in the spirit of love, we will experience the divine in the strongest way possible. And that was so present for us this weekend. And now switching gears to those questions that came up, of course, I can't go through all of them. But what was so fascinating was, so part of the event, because it was based on inner sales, mastering the inner sales game. And I was really helping each of our attendees learn to trust the information they have within themselves and to bring in that inner confidence and bring in that inner knowing, because that is part of the inner sales game, because that's what helps you know who I'm meant to serve, who I'm not meant to serve. But as an extension, it also is also the foundation to all receiving, is just truly trust what you need and be willing to ask for it. And so one of the tools we were using this weekend was oracle cards, and learning how to use oracle cards in various ways, how to read them. And, I do bring oracle cards into a lot of my events, usually in a very light way, but they're usually there somewhere in the room. I find they bring out a sense of play and magic and wonder in people. But we were using them in a much deeper way and learning how to write sales copy with using oracle cards. And so at least two of the decks had some reference to fairies, because we were using all different kinds of decks so that people had a chance to experience, the energy of one deck versus another, and get to know what would work for them, and understand that everything has energy and you can accept it and reject it, because some is aligned and some is not. And so these fairy cards brought up questions like, what could the fairy mean? And what are fairies, and are fairies real? And we just ended up in this very long discussion about fairies. And so I had told them the story of the fact that there is a fairy that lives it doesn't live in my backyard, visits us quite frequently, but typically only comes actually when I'm doing VIP days with clients. So oftentimes when I'm doing a VIP day and that client needs to summon up some real courage to take a leap of faith in their life or their business, this particular fairy shows up. And he's never given me his name in a way that I can pronounce it. It's sort of like sounds. So I can't even tell you what his name is, but I can tell you what he looks like. And probably the most interesting aspect of his description is his height. So he's very tall. He's about 7 feet tall. And that was so interesting for me when he first started to show up, because I just always assumed fairies were small, because I think that's what we were taught. But this one isn't. He's quite large. He can shrink down, but he is quite large. And as one of my clients was talking about her experience with that particular fairy showing up, and the advice he had, which was, for God's sake, stop waiting around. You need to pull the trigger on this thing you need to do. And that's kind of how I find fairies typically are. They have very little patience for our human fear-based brain. And they do not feel any big need to help us, because really they're here to be here on behalf of planet Earth, Earth magic. They will help us if we show them enough love and show enough respect for the earth and give them gifts and show our appreciation. But they're unlike our spirit guides and angels. They're not so committed to helping us. That's not their job. So they're a very fascinating energy. And of course, they're just so alive and playful and wonderful. So I was telling the group that, I guess I must have done a Facebook Live about these fairies after that particular client VIP day, or maybe a different one. And a neighbor who I adore saw the Facebook Live, and she was telling her young daughter about these fairies. She lives right down the street from us. And this little girl is just she's the most wonderful sprite-like magical human being that you could ever meet. She's just a ball of light and wonder, and I adore her. And just to give you an example of what she's like, she right after my dad died back in March, she created all of these flowers out of materials in her home, Play-Doh and different crafts and arts. And then she wrote me this long card where she explained how she understood, because she had experienced a loss, and it was, can't remember now, I think it was the loss of a pet. And it was just so sweet and wonderful. I mean, this girl is just the epitome of love. So when she heard about these fairies in my backyard, her and her mom assembled a fairy house. They built a whole house for our fairies. And they came and they did an installation of this fairy house in our backyard. And they left. And my son and this girl's brother are friends. And so my son happened to be at their house later on. And when my son came home later, I was talking about the fairy house and how wonderful it is. And he said, yeah, well, this little girl said, yes, well, Mrs. Lennon is so nice, and I can tell she really believes in those fairies. So I really just wanted to play along, because it's really just so sad. She's an adult and she still believes in these fairies. And clearly this little girl felt that she really saw how the world worked, and it did not involve said fairies. So it was just so charming and funny that here I am, this, 40, whatever age I was last year, 47-year-old adult. And she's looking on me with pity, which is, what a lot of the world will look on you with if you start talking about fairies. And I don't, as a result of it, often talk about the fairies. Also because I don't think I'm particularly aligned with fairy magic, meaning I just don't think that's one of my strongest gifts, is seeing the fairies and working with them. Other people have a stronger alliance with that. I see them and I respect them, and I appreciate them being present in our world and around my home, but I have a much closer relationship to spirit guides and angels, etc. So we were having this discussion at the retreat, and it was so fascinating. One of our attendees is a financial planner. I would have pegged her as just straight-laced. And, she just had so much curiosity about the fairies. And then people were sharing quietly their experience with fairies and just how can they work with them, and so many discussions. And it was so incredible for me, one, to just see the truth that deep down inside, we are all magical children that really want permission to believe. That's really what so many of us are looking for. And I guess because of the way I'm built, the fact that I don't walk around in muumuus and I'm not spouting wisdom from my crystal ball. I'm a fairly adorable person on many days of the week. It's easier to hear about fairies from me maybe than someone else. And that was really important information for me, to remember that that's part of why I'm here, is to be the bridge between the magic and the pragmatic. And I wouldn't have known that had I not been in this, live event setting. So that was just so fabulous. And then sort of contrasting that, one of the other things we talked about was one of the ways we can block receiving, or all the ways we block receiving, is through resistance. But one of the places we hold resistance is difficult people in our lives. And I'm not a Harry Potter person, but a lot of the people in the room were calling it the Muggles. That we have these Muggles in our family who are just difficult, toxic people. They don't have any connection to, spirituality or divinity or magic in the world, and are just angry or toxic. And we were talking about, and I was sharing that you need to allow them to be real. And what that means is, so oftentimes we spend time trying to use our spiritual tricks, our spiritual tool belt, to make that relationship better or resolve it. And, especially if that person's very difficult, that conceptually, because most of us have done so much work in self-help and in spiritual development, we know that their issues only affect us if we, based on how we react to it, and we have total control of our reaction and blah, blah, blah. But the reality is we are human as well, with a human reaction to someone being mean or hurtful to us. And what I was explaining is you have to let the muggles be who they are in your life and own the truth about how that feels. And the reason we often resist it and try to spiritually bypass resolving or dealing with those relationships is because we think that a good spiritual person or a good evolved person would have this bag of tricks to make this relationship work. But the reality is you incarnated as a human with all those human emotions, and you need to give those parts of you that are having a reaction to that person some time and space to have their reaction. You don't want to stay there. But if you don't let the truth of how that really feels in that moment, that person angered you or pissed you off or whatever, it doesn't mean you react to that person, but you do let yourself react. That's critical, because the part of you that is reacting to that person is the part of you that is seeing them through the human condition honestly. Like the human you is reacting to the human them. And that human part of you is the one that has the tools to actually interact with them in the healthiest way for you possible. And simply writing them off as a muggle doesn't actually get you where you need to go, which is to feel peaceful and present with them, even when they're being their muggle self. And so it was just so fascinating that over the course of these 2.5 days, that resulted in all of our attendees saying that somehow they had reached a deeper sense of themselves, that they understood something about themselves, or that they felt more grounded or at home or at peace with themselves, that all of this came with these very different energies of fairy magic and maybe muggle magic or muggle something. And then all the rainbow of emotions in between. It was so fascinating to see that. Also to be the conduit for that evolution for each person in the room, because if I wasn't willing to receive what was happening for them in that moment, if I wasn't willing to go with where that room was taking us, I might have rejected the fairy talk and I might have rejected the muggle talk because it wasn't on my piece of paper, right? My plan for the day. And so the reason I'm sharing that is what I want you to do is think about, where is your plan keeping you from really receiving what the universe is telling you as the truth of your next step? Because those plans can actually really get us stuck. And I was reflecting today as I had this just delicious, lunch by myself and downloaded for myself, all that had happened over the weekend. Just thinking, wow, this life I have, looking over it, creating these events, having this business, having this family, just all of it, just feeling such appreciation. I thought, wow, this is so much bigger than the vision I had for myself when I started my business. And I remember that first coaching exercise I was given in coaching school, which is to write out your dream day. This life, this day that I'm living right now, right here, right now, recording this podcast for you and everything else that happened is so much better, so much bigger, so much richer than anything I had dreamed for myself 10 years ago. And that's so incredible. And when I got home, there were flowers from one of our attendees, and, reiterating the fact that she can't even put into words what happened, but she knew that something had changed for her and she was grateful. And I thought, God, I get to be a part of that. I get to be a part of that. And then I remembered that the way I have gotten to this place is not through all high points. There were a lot of low points along the way. The death of both my parents, the crises I've had in my business, the being on the verge of giving up many times, like all of those moments. If 10 years ago, the 10 years ago me who had written out that vision day had seen that, had been shown that, even if she knew I was going to have the day I'm having today with the business and the life and the family and the home I have, if she had seen what she would have had to walk through, she never would have went. I can tell you that for a fact. 10 years ago, me never would have gone. And that is the gift of not knowing for all of us. We all want plans. They make our human brain feel safe, but the divine guides us along through our intuition, giving us exactly the step that we can handle based on the version of ourselves that we are today, knowing that the version of who we will be tomorrow will be different, and after that, different, and after that. And with each step we take, with each courageous moment forward, courageous movement forward, we become the person that can take the next step. And so I want to just ask you, trust what the universe is calling forth from you. Trust where your intuition is taking you. And if it takes you off the plan you have in writing, trust that. Because that plan was created by someone that is not you in this moment. At minimum, she was you yesterday or an hour ago. Because if you can let your intuition override the plan, I promise you, magic will happen. Fairies will find you, no matter how many muggles are around. Have an amazing day. Hey, thanks for listening. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, please share this podcast with them. And if you're feeling really generous, I'd love for you to leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. It helps us reach many more people, and it fills my heart with so much joy when I hear what you had to say about what you heard. I am cheering for your success. Have an amazing day.